Nestled in the heart of Idaho, Moscow embodies an idyllic blend of vibrant student life and a close-knit community. Renowned for its student-centric atmosphere, the city thrives around the prestigious University of Idaho, fostering an environment where academia meets a spirited collegiate lifestyle. The neighborhoods surrounding the university bustled with students residing in hostels, rented university properties, and homes just beyond the campus bounds. Despite Moscow's academic fame, occasional covert gatherings took place where students convened with friends and loved ones. Yet these gatherings were typically uneventful. However, on the chilling November 13, 2022 night, university students experienced a harrowing turn of events while unwinding after a party, disrupting the peaceful atmosphere they had anticipated. And this happened in this three-story house. The story begins with 4 individuals enrolled at the University of Idaho. 20-year-old Ethan Chapin, hailing from Conway, Washington. 21-year-old Kaylee Gonzaves from Rathdrum, Idaho. 20-year-old Zana Kernadal, belonging to Post Falls, Idaho. And 21-year-old Madison Moggan, originating from Coeur d'Alene, Idaho. Ethan was a freshman while Zana was a junior. Meanwhile, both Kaylee and Madison were seniors at the university. Ethan James Chapin, the eldest of triplets, was born at 4:43 p.m. on a picturesque Tuesday evening of October 29, 2002, at Swedish Hospital in Seattle. Maisie arrived moments later at 4:44, followed by Hunter at 4:45. Initially residing in Olympia at Summit Lake, the family spent the initial year and a half there before relocating to Conway. The children attended Conway School, receiving excellent education while actively participating in soccer, basketball, and cross-country. Ethan cherished fond moments of playing basketball alongside his brother at Conway, adorned in their team jerseys. Subsequently, Ethan enrolled at Mount Vernon High School, yet his on-campus schooling or normal schooling was disrupted by the onset of the COVID pandemic. Alongside his siblings, Ethan transitioned to Idaho, working at Hills Resort before attempting to resume studies at MVHS, which remained affected. They later worked at Tulip Town during the tulip season before returning to Hills Resort in Idaho for summer employment, just before commencing their stint at the University of Idaho. In August 2021, Ethan's family embarked on a journey to the University of Idaho to drop off their 3 children to college. Both Ethan and Hunter joined the fraternity Sigma Chi, while Maisie became part of the Kappa Alpha Theta sorority. Since beginning his studies at the University of Idaho, Ethan embraced a vibrant social life, engaged in intramural sports, and managed his academic responsibilities. He continued his passion for sports and also developed a romantic relationship with Zana Kernadal during this time. Zana Alexia Kernadal was born on July 5, 2002 at Kootenai Health Hospital in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho, and grew up in Post Falls. Her early years were marked by her talent as a gymnast, showcasing her skills from a young age. Throughout her schooling at Post Falls Middle and High School, Zana actively participated in volleyball, track, and soccer until her graduation in 2020. Alongside her studies, she also worked at Texas Roadhouse. Upon enrolling at the University of Idaho, Zana pursued a major in marketing while immersing herself in extracurricular activities, notably as an engaged member of the Pi Beta Phi sorority and the Vandal Solutions sales team. Juggling these commitments, she also held a part-time position at the Mad Greek restaurant in Moscow, Idaho. Beyond her academic and professional pursuits, Zana found joy in her dog, Shu Shine, cherished moments at EDM concerts, relished spending quality time with friends, and eagerly embarked on family trips with her sister and father. Her childhood was filled with fond memories of her grandparents' farm and summers spent by the river. Zana's vibrant personality made her deeply loved by her family, friends, and classmates. Known for her positive and outgoing nature, she had a special ability to make everyone feel included. Her zest for life, infectious humor, and unwavering enthusiasm made an indelible mark on all who had the privilege of knowing her. Now, Zana's co-occupant during her time at the University of Idaho, Madison May Moggan, was born on May 25, 2001 in Eugene, Oregon. She brought immense joy to her family and all around her from the very beginning. After spending her initial 2 years in Oregon, Madison's family relocated to the North Idaho region, where her parents had their roots. Her upbringing in Idaho was nothing short of wonderful. Beginning her education at Winton Elementary, she later transitioned to Coeur d'Alene Charter Academy before ultimately choosing to enroll in LCHS, a decision she made after articulating her reasons in a decisive letter alongside her lifelong friend, who was practically her sister, Kaylee. It was evident to everyone who knew her that Maddie's endearing personality made her feel immensely loved. Her unique offbeat and humorous approach brought smile and laughter to others, and it was a well-known fact that keeping her well-fed was essential. Maddie was respected for her determination and commitment to her future endeavors, excelling in academics and every job she undertook during high school and college. She built a network of friends, colleagues, supervisors, and teachers who admired her work ethic, care, and dedication. Excited about her academic pursuit at the University of Idaho, though a little farther from home, Maddie thrived, consistently earning a spot on the dean's list each semester. Joining Pi Beta Phi, she formed enduring bonds with close friends and also cherished having Kaylee alongside. Additionally, she found love with a boy named Jake, who held a special place in her heart. Now, Maddie's best friend, Kaylee Jade Gonzalez, was born in Concord, California on June 8, 2001. Even before her arrival, she was a radiant spark for her parents, Steve and Christy Gonzalez. As the third child, Kaylee brought a unique energy with her, born with distinctive black, thick curls, a charming button nose, and a perfectly round porcelain face adorned with a mysterious tiny scar on her forehead. Teased by her siblings about her horns, she remained a spirited and cherished middle child among her 5 siblings. Around the age of 1, Kaylee and her family relocated to North Idaho, where her vibrant personality flourished, growing into a beautiful, authentic, and social individual. She adored Claire's fashion accessories and had an innate talent for eliciting laughter from those around her. Her educational journey began at Bora Elementary alongside her older brother and sister before transitioning to Charter Academy for middle school, where she crossed paths with Maddie Mogan, making the start of an inseparable bond. From that day forward, their lives intertwined, transforming their family of 5 into a family of 6. Despite initial hesitations from her parents, Kaylee attended Lake City High School before venturing out to the University of Idaho alongside Maddie. Joining the Alpha Phi sorority, she pursued her aspirations of becoming an elementary school teacher. Throughout her academic years, Kaylee demonstrated remarkable scholastic achievements, complemented by her ability to effortlessly make friends wherever she went. Her social, quirky, and infectious personality often infused a sense of humor and a hint of mischief into her interactions. Enthusiastic about adventure and pranks, she balanced her studies with a full-time job, showcasing her diligent work ethic. During their tenure at the University of Idaho, Madison and Zana resided together in a rental home located in close proximity to the university campus. Kaylee had previously been a resident of the same house, but had recently moved out. However, on the evening of November 12, 2022, Kaylee returned to the residence to attend a nearby party. Earlier on the evening of November 12th, 2 of the 4 students, Ethan and Zana, were present at an on-campus gathering organized by the nearby Sigma Chi fraternity, which lasted from 8 to 9 p.m. Subsequently, they arrived back home, which was the rented house, at 1:45 a.m. Meanwhile, the remaining 2 individuals, close friends Maddie and Kayla, had spent their evening at the Corner Club, a downtown sports bar, arriving at 10 p.m. and departing around 1:30 a.m. By 1:56 a.m., all 4 individuals had indeed returned to the shared rental house. Moreover, the building accommodated 2 additional students who resided on the ground floor, sharing the space with them. All of them retired to bed for the night. One of the residents, Dylan Mortensen, stayed on the ground floor. Maddie and Kaylee shared a bed, while the other residents stayed on the same floor, but in a separate room adjacent to theirs. And Zana and Ethan shared Zana's bed. During the early morning hours of November 13, 2022, one of the residents, apart from the 4 mentioned, who was asleep on Maddie and Kaylee's floor, was awakened by sounds resembling Zana and her dog. She even sensed hearing Zana saying, "There's someone here." Meanwhile, Dylan on the ground floor, upon hearing unusual sounds, opened her room door twice to investigate. During the second instance, she discerned what appeared to be cries emanating from Zana's room, accompanied by a male voice reassuring, "It's okay. I'm going to help you." Curiosity compelled her to open the door a third time, revealing a figure draped in black attire and a mask covering their mouth and nose, advancing in her direction. The unfamiliar individual, unnoticed by Dylan, proceeded past her and utilized the sliding glass door to depart. Stricken by a state of shock, she stood frozen momentarily, eventually seeking safety by locking herself within her room. No calls to 911 were immediately made. However, at 11:58 a.m. on November 13, 2022, hours following the incident, a call was finally placed from within the residence utilizing a roommate cell requesting aid for an unconscious individual. Upon police arrival, they discovered the home's door open with no signs of forced entry or internal damage. Nothing seemed to be missing from the premises. Both the roommates were inside when the authorities arrived. However, the police made a grisly and distressing discovery. The heartbreaking truth unfolded. Zana, Ethan, Maddie, and Kaylee had been fatally stabbed while in their respective beds on the second and third floors of the home. The victims were found without restraints or gags, and blood spatters stained the walls at the scene. Maddie and Kaylee were located in Maddie's bedroom, while Zana and Ethan were discovered in Zana's room. However, the lingering question remained, why did the killer spare the lives of the two roommates? Homicide detective Phil Waters speculated that the assailant may not have noticed Dylan or the other girl in the darkness. However, this assumption cannot be unequivocally regarded as the absolute truth. At present, it's the closest explanation available, pending further investigation and evidence. The surviving roommates had summoned friends to the home as they were concerned about one of the victims on the second floor, believing her to be unconscious and unresponsive. Though the identity of the 911 caller was withheld, the police verified that the caller was not regarded as a suspect in the tragic incident. During the investigation, the police uncovered a live-streamed video on Twitch by the Grub Truck, a food truck located 4 blocks south at Friendship Square. The footage depicted Maddie and Kaylee at 1:41 a.m. engaged in conversation and displaying smiles. 10 minutes later, they acquired their food and departed, initially presumed to have taken an Uber ride home, covering the distance of approximately 1 mile. 7 unsuccessful phone calls were registered from Kaylee's phone to her ex-boyfriend, a fellow student between 2:26 and 2:52 a.m. Additionally, Maddie attempted to contact Kaylee's former boyfriend 3 times during a similar time frame, from 2:44 to 2:52 a.m., all resulting in an unanswered calls. These calls underwent investigation, with police ultimately concluding that they did not consider the recipient of those missed calls to be involved in the crime. Following a forensic examination of Zana's cell phone, records indicated her activity on the TikTok app at 4:12 a.m. Additionally, security cameras positioned near the residence captured audio recordings of whimpering, a notable loud thud, and repeated barking from a dog. Commencing approximately at 4:17 a.m., detectives deduced that the tragic killings took place within a window of time estimated to be between 4 a.m. and 4:25 a.m. On the evening following the tragic events of November 13th, the university made the decision to cancel classes for November 14th. Furthermore, they arranged a candlelight vigil, initially planned to be held on the UI administration building lawn for the evening of November 16th, which was subsequently postponed for 2 weeks. Initially, investigators stated that there appeared to be no immediate risk to the community following the day of the killings. However, 3 days later, Moscow Police Chief James Fry revised the assessment stating, "We cannot definitively assert that there's no threat to the community." Fall break had been planned to commence after November 18th, with classes set to resume on November 28th. However, in response to the initial assurances provided by the police being met with skepticism and concern from many residents and other Moscow residents regarding their safety, an early Thanksgiving holiday exodus from the area began. Some individuals who chose to remain were understandably anxious and exercised caution, leading several professors to cancel their classes during this period. The fathers of Kaylee Gonzalez and Ethan Chapin expressed criticism concerning the restricted information flow from both the police and the university to the families of the victims. Additionally, a wave of speculation and misinformation about the case emerged on social media, propagated by individuals on platforms like TikTok, self-identified psychics, and various other social media users. In response to this escalating situation, the Moscow Police Department rebuked internet sleuths for their involvement in generating widespread online rumors and disrupting the ongoing investigations. In a news release issued on December 2nd, they highlighted the speculative nature of the information circulating without factual substantiation, which was fueling community anxieties and disseminating falsehoods. The Ladakh County coroner conducted autopsies on the 4 victims on November 17, 2022, revealing that all had sustained multiple stab wounds, particularly fatal ones inflicted on the chest and upper body. The nature of the wounds indicated that a large knife or very similar ones had been used in the attacks. Additionally, at least one victim displayed defensive wounds on their hands, suggesting attempts to fend off the assailant, with the possibility that others also made similar efforts. Disturbingly, the victims may have been attacked while they were asleep in their beds. However, no evidence suggests in any form of assault in the tragic deaths. The coroner unequivocally declared all 4 deaths as homicides resulting from stabbing. Yet none of the victims were found tied or gagged. Despite thorough investigations, no weapon has been recovered. Authorities suspect that the perpetrator or perpetrators employed a fixed-blade knife in the commission of the crime. The surviving roommate who had cited the suspect provided a description, portraying the individual as an unfamiliar male, approximately 5 foot, 10 inches tall. The roommate noted that the suspect was not notably muscular, but possessed an athletically built physique, further emphasizing distinctively bushy eyebrows as a notable feature of the individual's appearance. On November 19, 2022, law enforcement authorities appealed to the public for any video footage captured at the residence on the night of the tragic incident. To facilitate the collection of potential evidence, a phone tip line and email address were established, encouraging students and other individuals to submit any relevant information to the authorities. During a press conference held on November 23, 2022, the Moscow police chief disclosed that authorities had received several tips, one of which suggested that Kaylee might have had a stalker. However, at that point, law enforcement officials were unable to substantiate or confirm the reliability of that claim, nor were they able to identify any individual fitting the description of the potential stalker. By December 5, 2022, the response from the public was substantial, with more than 2,600 tips submitted via email, approximately 2,700 phone calls received, and additional 1,000 digital media submissions through these designated tip lines. Subsequently, on December 24, 2022, the investigative team disclosed that they had amassed a staggering count of at least 15,000 tips pertaining to the case from various sources and members of the public. Initially, the police did not rule out the possibility of there being more than one perpetrator involved in the tragic incident. Authorities expressed their belief that the attack was potentially targeted. However, they had yet to determine definitively whether the target was the residence itself or its occupants. After receiving numerous tips from the public on December 15, 2022, the police announced their intention to scrutinize records involving approximately 22,000 fifth-generation Hyundai Elantras manufactured between 2011 and 2013. Surveillance footage from the area had captured video evidence of an Elantra present around the time of the tragic incident. Investigators observed that this vehicle had made multiple passes along the same route in close proximity to the residence. Another surveillance recording acquired by investigators depicted an Elantra passing by the victim's home 3 times, commencing around 3:29 a.m. Subsequently, at 4:04 a.m., the Elantra returned to the residence for a 4th time. Notably, at 4:20 a.m., the same car was observed speeding away from the victim's neighborhood. Some days later, the investigators finally tracked the ownership of the Elantra vehicle to a local resident, Brian Koberger, who had driven it along with his father to the Pocono Mountains in Pennsylvania for the holiday season. He and his father were pulled over by the police for tailgating. During their journey, Brian Koberger was pulled over again by the Indiana State Police on Interstate 70 outside Greenfield, Indiana, for infractions of speeding and tailgating. However, the FBI refuted allegations that they had directed the Indiana State Police to conduct these stops. Subsequently, when investigators dug deeper into Koberger's whereabouts, they acquired cell phone data indicating Koberger's phone had ceased connecting to the network around 2:47 a.m. in Pullman on November 13, 2022, before reconnecting at approximately 4:48 a.m. near Blaine, Idaho, an area near U.S. Highway 95 south of Moscow. Further cell phone data revealed that Koberger's phone accessed a cell tower in close proximity to the victim's residence at around 9 a.m. on November 13, 2022, roughly 5 hours after the tragic incident occurred. Moreover, police obtained data indicating that his phone had pinged from the cell phone tower nearest to the residence at least 12 times between June 2022 and November 13, 2022. However, this was not all. In addition to this evidence, investigators collected a DNA sample from the crime scene that did not match the DNA of any of the victims. This DNA was discovered on a tan leather knife sheath found on Maddie's bed. Authorities utilized a public genealogy database, which led them to a partial match with an individual having a familial connection to Koberger. Subsequently, investigators pursued this lead and successfully traced the DNA evidence to Koberger by matching it with DNA retrieved from the trash collected at his family's residence in Pennsylvania. Investigators proceeded to surveil Koberger outside his parents' residence in Pennsylvania. During surveillance, Koberger was observed on multiple occasions wearing surgical gloves and placing trash bags into a neighbor's garbage can. Subsequently, the items retrieved from the trash were sent to the Idaho State Lab for further testing as part of the investigation. Authorities also noted that Kohberger had meticulously cleaned his vehicle, thoroughly addressing both the interior and exterior, ensuring that no area was overlooked or left uncleaned. On December 30th, 2022, 28-year-old Brian Christopher Kohberger was apprehended, unveiling comprehensive details about his background and personal information. Brian Christopher Kohberger was born on November 21, 1994, hailed from Albrightsville, Pennsylvania. Raised in Pennsylvania with his parents Michael and Marianne and two sisters Amanda and Melissa, Kohberger's online presence was limited until his arrest. His academic pursuits primarily focused on criminality and psychology, aligning with his family's inclination towards education, especially in psychology-related fields. He graduated from Pleasant Valley High School in 2013 and attended Monroe Career and Technical Institute in Bartonsville, but dropped out a year later. Kohberger pursued an associate degree in psychology at Northampton Community College in Bethlehem, which he obtained in 2018. After his graduation, he secured a position as a security guard within the Pleasant Valley School District, where his father had previously held a maintenance role for an extended period and his mother had served as a substitute teacher for a while. While at work, Kohberger's proactive response during a colleague's medical emergency garnered local attention in Pennsylvania. However, before this, his high school years were marked by weight-related bullying. Kohberger underwent a significant weight loss, transforming his appearance and purportedly impacting his demeanor. Friends noted a noticeable shift in his behavior post-weight loss, describing instances of bullying and manipulation within his social circle. Several acquaintances asserted that Kohberger battled drug abuse, allegedly starting with marijuana, to cope with teenage harassment and escalating to a heroin addiction. He reportedly sought rehabilitation after high school, continuing his education with an associate's degree, and later pursuing higher studies at DeSales University in Center City, Pennsylvania, where he excelled academically in psychology and criminology. And finally, in 2022, he received his master's degree in criminal justice. Kohberger ventured to Washington State University for a PhD program in Pullman, Washington, aiming to achieve a career in law enforcement. However, during this time, he encountered disciplinary issues in his teaching assistant role due to behavioral problems and problematic attitudes toward women. Email correspondence between Kohberger and Professor John Snyder revealed repeated warnings about his professionalism and conduct. Ultimately, on December 19, 2022, a month after the tragic murders, Kohberger was terminated from his teaching position at WSU. On December 30, 2022, Brian Kohberger was apprehended at his parents' residence in Monroe County, Pennsylvania, by an FBI SWAT team and Pennsylvania State Police. During the arrest, officials discovered Kohberger in the kitchen, attired in a shirt and shorts, donning examination gloves, and sorting trash into individual Ziploc baggies. He faced charges of 4 counts of first-degree murder and 1 felony count of burglary upon his arrest. Assigned a public defender, he remained incarcerated without bond at the Monroe County Correctional Facility in Stroudsburg, Pennsylvania. Kohberger's legal representatives asserted his innocence and his determination to establish his clean hands. His family issued a statement extending sympathies to the victims and emphasized the importance of presuming their son's purity. Individuals within Kohberger's social circle were stunned by the accusations against him, although some from his past were less surprised by the allegations. Kohberger then consented to extradition during his initial appearance at the county courthouse on January 3, 2023. Subsequently, on January 4th, he was transported by flight to Pullman and then driven to the Ladakh County Jail in Moscow, where he was detained without bail. A week later, on January 12, 2023, he appeared for a status conference in the same courtroom at the courthouse. On May 17, 2023, the Ladakh County District Court disclosed that Kohberger had been formally charged by a grand jury with 5 offenses, 4 counts of first-degree murder, and 1 count of felony burglary. The scheduled preliminary hearing set for June 26th was annulled following the indictment. On Monday, May 22, 2023, in Ladakh County District Court, Kohberger declined to enter a plea. As just seen, the judge, in response to this unconventional stance, proceeded to enter a not guilty plea on behalf of Kohberger, paving the way for a trial where he could potentially face the death penalty. On June 26, 2023, the Ladakh County Prosecutor's Office declared its intent to pursue the death penalty due to the statutorily aggravating circumstances associated with the first-degree murder charges against Kohberger. He remains detained at the Ladakh County Jail without bond, maintaining a plea of not guilty to all charges. The judge scheduled Kohberger's trial for October 2, 2023, accommodating requests from both Kohberger's attorney and the state. As of now, No further updates have been disclosed to the public regarding the case. However, it's speculated that prosecutors have requested to schedule Kohberger's trial for the summer of 2024. As for the question regarding Kohberger's motive for committing this heinous act, the answer remains elusive. Law enforcement authorities believe that the intended target of his attack was either Madison or Kaylee. Nevertheless, no substantial clues or evidence have been discovered thus far to confirm this statement, keeping the case still a mystery, waiting to be unraveled. This case takes us to the town of Stowmarket in Suffolk in the UK. A well-known couple in the area, Stephen and Unsolved, had been married for 45 years. They lived in a little cul-de-sac in the brick fields, with their 3 sons and many grandchildren frequently popping in and out as well. 64-year-old Stephen and 62-year-old Jessica N, who went by and had met in Glasgow as teenagers. Stephen was about to join the Royal Marines at the time, where he would remain for the next 30 years. They soon married and had their sons, Gary, Christopher, and Stephen Jr., and the family of 5 did a lot of moving around, relocating to wherever Stephen needed them. Stephen Jr. said he and his brothers had a happy childhood, filled with lots of fun and laughter. The moving was never a problem, as long as they were all together. In the 1990s, Stephen left the military and he and their sons settled into a home in Stowmarket, where they started running a pub and later a bowling alley. It's safe to say the family was always very busy. Their sons soon married and had children of their own, and Stephen and Ann loved the hustle and bustle of their grandchildren being around. Given their very social businesses, Stephen and Ann quickly became popular in the town, and were loved by locals and tourists alike. Stephen Jr. described Ann as the glue and backbone of the family who lived for her children and grandchildren, and their father was their idol and best friend. Between the years of 2013 and 2017, Stephen Sr. started working as a councillor for the UK Independence Party, more commonly known as UKIP, for Stowmarket South on Suffolk County Council. People in the town said he was very hands-on and active in his role, and before long, he was quite a high-profile person in the local political scene. As good as everything had seemed from the outside for Stephen and Ann, behind closed doors can often tell a very different story. By 2017, after Stephen was unsuccessful in the local elections, his and Ann's relationship was at an all-time low. There had been murmurs around town for a while about the couple's issues. The reality was, since the early 90s, the pair had been hiding a lot of volatility and problems. A lot of people. Stephen was extremely controlling, often belittling Ann and putting her down. And before long, the verbal fights became physical altercations, and Ann would often be concealing bruises on her arms and legs. When the family moved to Suffolk, the problems only escalated further, and it reached a point where they were fighting every day. Stephen started threatening her life, telling her he could destroy her if he wanted to. On one occasion, inside the pub they owned, and in front of customers, Stephen fired a shotgun above Ann's head when he thought she wasn't showing him respect. He then tried to throw her down the stairs. The police were called several times, but things never went any further. One thing that only poured more fuel on the fire was that Stephen and Ann were both heavy drinkers and had been for years. The more they drank, the worse the arguments would get. Ann had been to rehab before and was aware that she had a problem. By 2017, she admitted that her drinking was out of control. Her mental and physical health was on a rapid decline and she was miserable. Things got even worse when it came to light that Stephen had had an affair that would last for 3 months. And, who was having suspicions that Stephen was involved with someone else, eventually guessed the pin to his phone, and discovered many exchanges between Stephen and a contact called SBG, his code for Steve's beautiful girl. She was devastated, but had no clue who it was and begged Stephen to tell her everything. After denying it for weeks, the truth finally came out. It turned out that Stephen had been having an affair with his own son's wife and mother of his grandchild, Anastasia. This was a bombshell for the family. Everyone was horrified. When Anastasia was confronted, she said that Stephen had been chasing her for years, long before she started seeing his son, Gary. At one point, she found out Stephen had a folder on his computer full of photos of her, some where he had photoshopped her into graphic and explicit scenes. He then started sending her photographs of himself from decades ago, when he was a bodybuilder, telling her he was lonely and hadn't had sex in years. Anastasia said after months of his persistence, and being fearful of what he might do if she continued to say no, she and Stephen started a sexual relationship. Stephen Jr. said when it all came out, it was a very dark day for the whole family. The betrayal had so many levels to it. He said his mother was completely broken and mortified. Anastasia said she was in a vulnerable place at the time, maintaining she felt ashamed and guilty, and was sorry that any of it had happened. Gary stopped talking to his father after this, and he and Anastasia said they had started working hard to repair their marriage. Gary said it brought them closer and they remained committed to each other. After news of the affair came out, on top of the endless fights and emotional and physical abuse for so many years, Anne was in a very dark place, but told people that she was worried she was too old to start again. Having been with Stephen for 45 years, the thought of moving on was too overwhelming for her, and she said that she would push through and make it work no matter what. As Christmas 2017 was approaching, it seemed that Anne had turned over a new leaf. By December she had given up smoking, was working on controlling her drinking again, and had lost a lot of weight. She told colleagues that she was feeling positive about her future, and was keen to put the past behind her. Despite all of this, sadly, Christmas Day for the family was a less than happy occasion, with the tension already palpable. Everything was turning into a fight. Was disappointed that Stephen hadn't bothered to get her anything nice to unwrap, and was left tearful and embarrassed when Stephen threw the Christmas dinner she had made in the bin. That night, with her moods at an all-time low, and posted a troubling and sad status to Facebook. "Happy Christmas to you all. Hope you are doing well. Have a good day. I hope I will still be here in 2018. We will see," she said. 5 days later, everything would change. 10:20 p.m., December 30th, 2017. Police received a disturbingly calm call from none other than Stephen Searle. As can be heard from the 999 call, police had arrived at the house in less than 2 minutes. As he let them inside, Stephen said, "Sorry. I've been a very naughty boy. Everyone has their breaking point." Paramedics tried to revive Anne for half an hour, but she was pronounced dead at 10:58 p.m. Several hours later, at 4 a.m., Stephen Jr. was woken up by officers, banging on his door. He was expecting them to tell him that someone in his family had been in a car accident or had suddenly fallen ill and was in hospital. When they told him the awful truth that his mother was gone and his father was responsible, he said the wind was knocked out of him and he went totally numb. Stephen Searle was remanded in custody, and on the 2nd of January he appeared at South East Suffolk Magistrates Court. He spoke only to confirm his personal details and made no indication of a plea. A post-mortem examination revealed that Anne had died from a sustained compression to the neck. According to experts, Stephen had put Anne into a chokehold for a long period of time. A forensic pathologist said that Anne would have lost consciousness after about 15 seconds, and causing her death required further sustained pressure for a period of several minutes. Stephen told the police that he had been acting in self-defense. He said an argument had been sparked after the affair with Anastasia was brought up again, and had attacked him with a steak knife, and he struggled to fight her off. He said he was using one hand to try and disarm her, and the other to restrain her, maintaining he had accidentally killed her in the process, something police said they didn't believe at all. The investigators said Stephen was a self-centered narcissist, caring for little else apart from himself. Detective Chief Superintendent Eamon Bridger said his team listened to the 999 call many times, and everything they thought about Stephen as a person was reflected very clearly in those 2 minutes. He spoke calmly, as if he was ordering some food, with no remorse or sadness, no angst or upset. This was amplified further when it turned out that Anne had actually died, an hour before the phone call to police was made, and he hadn't bothered to contact anyone during that time. Stephen said, "Eventually she stopped struggling, and I said, 'Thank fuck for that, I'm gonna have a cigarette.' She didn't reply. I was expecting her to kick off again. When she didn't, I thought she had gone to bed and that it would be fine in the morning." He was still maintaining it was self-defense and continued with this argument in court, pleading not guilty for murder and hoping for a manslaughter conviction instead. In July 2018, a 7-day trial got underway. The prosecution were confident that they had enough to convince a jury that this was not self-defense. They argued that Anne would have been unconscious within about 20 seconds, and the way that Stephen had carried on despite the fact she wasn't responding was proof that he was intent on killing her in that moment. They said that he hadn't tried to revive his wife, he hadn't called an ambulance, and he hadn't even called the police until an hour later, by which point it was too late to do anything, and his cold and collected phone call to police painted a picture of someone that was not panicking, upset or shaken up by what had happened. He simply didn't care. After just a few hours of deliberations, the jury rejected Stephen's self-defense argument, and he was found guilty of murder. He was later sentenced to life with a minimum of 14 years to serve. Stephen sat emotionless as the sentence was read out. Stephen Jr. gave a victim's impact statement, and said the Searle family will never heal or recover from what had happened. I feel emotionally drained most days. The judge said he took into consideration Stephen's age, fact that premeditation could not be proven, and the fact that he had just been diagnosed with prostate cancer. And he said the minimum term of 14 years to serve reflected all of these factors. The judge said in part, "By your own hands, you have brought grief and distress untold upon your family. You have deprived your children of the mother that they loved. You have deprived your grandchildren of their grandmother, and you have deprived and of the remaining years of her life. I think that it must go without saying that your actions have caused devastating waves of pain and anguish to crash through your entire family. No sentence that I impose can ever undo that suffering." Detective Chief Superintendent Amon Bridger said that their thoughts were with the family and stated, "Domestic abuse continues to take place behind closed doors. Suffolk Constabulary will take positive action against the perpetrators where we have the opportunity. When the victims of abuse come to us, we will work with them to address their needs and make them and their families safe. Our focus is firmly on the needs of victims, and we will continue to work closely with our partners in tackling this type of crime." The aftermath of what happened that December night is still widely felt in the small and close community. Stephen Jr. said he went to bed with both his parents, and in the space of a few hours, they were both gone. The only comfort he takes is that the last time he saw his mother, she was so happy and joyful. The house was filled with laughter, and she was in the highest and most positive of spirits. A squirrel hunter in Brent, Alabama's Talladega National Forest made a horrifying discovery on November 9, 2015. At approximately 9 a.m., the mutilated and nude body of a woman was tied to a tree. When law enforcement officers got to the scene, they immediately got to work on the investigation. As soon as they started to doubt the victim's identity, Tuscaloosa County sent them a missing persons report for 29-year-old Samantha Payne, who turned out to be the victim. Investigators were soon led in a more unsettling direction by new evidence, although initially it seemed as though Samantha was a part of a horrific ritual sacrifice. Was she really a ritual victim after all, or was there a darker tale involving the cunning murderer hiding in plain sight? Today's case takes us to Tuscaloosa County in western Alabama, a significant hub for the state's business, education, and industrial sectors. With 227,000 residents, it is the fifth most populous county in Alabama. Tuscaloosa County is renowned for its picturesque landscape and designated wilderness areas. It is bordered by the Appalachian Mountains and the southern Gulf coastal plain. Additionally, the University of Alabama, a prestigious school and a significant employer in the area, is located there. Tuscaloosa County has a fair share of crime, just like the majority of other counties of similar size. However, as of 2023, the crime rate has significantly decreased due to law enforcement efforts. But in the fall of 2015, a pretty graphic murder that shocked the locals in Tuscaloosa County made headlines. On Monday, November 9, 2015, at 9:00 a.m., Jeffrey Elliott, a squirrel hunter, was traveling through the Talladega National Forest south of Tuscaloosa County. He came upon a horrifying scene as he got closer to a thicket of trees close to South Sandy Road. A woman's naked, disfigured, and headless body was bound with barbed wire to a tree. She lay with her head about 14 feet away from the tree. After a distraught Jeffrey called the Tuscaloosa County Sheriff's Office in a panic, deputies showed up on the scene shortly after. Investigators were taken aback by how violent the crime was. The woman's body was so severely decomposed and looked to have been severely beaten that the authorities realized it would be challenging to identify the victim. The body was brought to the Tuscaloosa County Medical Examiner's office along with the severed head. In an attempt to explain the grisly incident, investigators searched the area. Investigators ruled out the idea that the scene was a cult sacrifice ritual because there were no altars or other markers to indicate the location. The crime scene was searched, but no clues were found. There were no obvious drag marks or tire impressions. Neither identification papers nor personal items were found in the vicinity of the body. Due to a dearth of evidence, investigators had to entertain a different theory. The victim had been attacked elsewhere and then brought to the forest to be executed. The complete absence of forensic evidence baffled investigators, but two unexpected leads surfaced back at the sheriff's office. Despite no evidence being found at the crime scene, investigators learned of a missing persons report for Samantha Payne, a 29-year-old local woman. That same day, Suzanne Payne, her mother, stated that she had not seen her daughter since Friday, October 30, 2015. Although Samantha's photo could not be matched to the decomposed remains from the crime scene, there was a good chance that the victim was the missing woman. If the coroner's report could confirm that Samantha Payne was their victim, then the police would have to rely on it. Dr. Stephen Dutton conducted the victim's autopsy. He found it difficult to pinpoint the victim's identity and the precise cause of death. This was caused by the victim's severe injuries and mistreatment in addition to the decomposed state of the remains. This included for broken ribs and multiple lacerations on the skin caused by a sharp object. Her teeth had been extracted, along with her finger and toenails. The most perplexing finding, though, was the absence of her internal organs. Dutton was unable to establish whether the victim's organs were harvested by a murderer or scavenged by untamed animals, but it was clear that this was a homicide based on the manner the body had been tied to a tree and dismembered. DNA was taken from the body by the coroner and sent to be tested on Samantha's relatives. A sheriff's deputy from nearby Hale County called in to report an intriguing piece of information, while Tuscaloosa County investigators awaited a positive identification. Concerned neighbors close to the Talladega National Forest had reported an odd car that had been abandoned along South Sandy Road approximately 10 days prior. The deputy discovered a couple strolling by the side of the road and stopped to talk with them after going to look into the matter. The deputy reported to the police that the two individuals had given their names as Stephen George, 27, and Chili Bruce, 18. The deputy saw that their clothes were stained with blood, despite their claims that they had run out of gas and had to leave their car and walk home. After searching the two, he discovered that they were carrying crystal. The deputy informed the investigators that Charlie and Stephen had been taken into custody at the Hale County Jail on charges of drug possession. Stephen and Chili were visited by detectives from the Tuscaloosa County Sheriff's Office at the Hale County Jail early on November 10, 2010. They both acknowledged that Samantha Payne was a friend of theirs when asked if they knew her. When investigators questioned Stephen and Chili about any information they had regarding the remains found in the forest, they unexpectedly confessed that the body found there was Samantha's. Furthermore, they acknowledged their involvement in the events that preceded her demise. They insisted, though, that they had nothing to do with her death. Rather, they accused Michael David Belcher, a 31-year-old friend of theirs. Investigators were told by Chili that Michael and Samantha were friends after their previous relationship ended. After Samantha threatened to report Michael to the police for stealing her car, Michael made the decision to kill her on Sunday, November 1, 2015. In addition, Chili gave investigators important information when she revealed that Michael was the rightful owner of the car she and Stephen had abandoned close to Talladega National Forest. She said that there was evidence in the car linking him to the murder. Investigators had a starting point with Chili's statement, but her cryptic answer suggested there was more to the story than what she had revealed. Stephen and Chili were taken to the Tuscaloosa Sheriff's County Jail by investigators, where they were charged with capital murder and detained without bond while awaiting additional questioning. The Tuscaloosa County Sheriff's Office also received Michael's car, which had been impounded in Hale County. Investigators discovered that their suspects were telling the truth after entering the vehicle registration number through the system. It is true that Michael Belcher owned the car. The investigators got ready for a challenging assignment as well. They had to break the news to Samantha's family that their lovely daughter had died horribly. On October 30, 1986, Samantha Christine Payne was born in Dallas County, Alabama. She was raised in a loving family consisting of her sister Katrina, two brothers, Stephen and Jonathan Payne, and her parents Roy and Suzanne Payne. Samantha's family said she was understanding and forgiving. She had put a lot of effort into her part-time jobs to pay for her college education. She had a reputation for cherishing her friends and giving thoughtful gifts. But Samantha had joined the wrong crowd in her mid-20s and began dabbling with crystal. Samantha's parents had made a concerted effort to assist her in breaking the habit, but she was unable to separate herself from her questionable new group of friends. The distraught parents were questioned by investigators regarding the last day they had seen her alive. Samantha's mother, Suzanne, stated that on October 30, 2015, she had gone to a Halloween party. On that day, Samantha turned 29. She wanted to dress like Dorothy from The Wizard of Oz, but she was afraid her friends would make fun of her. Since it was her birthday, Suzanne had consoled her daughter and told her to go enjoy herself. Samantha's parents never thought it would be the last time they would see their daughter as a beaming Samantha left the house. A warrant was issued for Michael Belcher's arrest based on the information that Chili and Stephen provided. Michael was brought in for questioning at the Tuscaloosa County Sheriff's Office on November 11, 2015, but he was uncooperative right away. Even though he denied knowing Samantha's whereabouts and steadfastly refused to acknowledge his role in the murder, the investigators' investigation was not yet at a standstill. Given that Stephen and Chili had already admitted to seeing Michael kill Samantha, investigators attempted a different approach. They made a plea agreement with Stephen and Chili, offering them a lighter sentence in court in exchange for their testimony against Michael. They both nodded, and the harrowing account of what transpired before Samantha's murder started. Stephen and Chili claimed that they had continued their drug-fueled party with Michael and Samantha on Halloween night well into the next day, well past midnight. Two additional friends, Alyssa Watson, 22, and Marcus George, 34, joined them. All six of them were smoking meth on the evening of November 1st, 2015, at Michael's father's motorcycle repair shop. Michael was regarded as their ringleader by the group who frequently congregated at the store. Stephen proposed to the group that they take Samantha's car when she went to use the restroom. After removing the keys from Samantha's purse, Stephen and the other three men drove off with the vehicle. Samantha did not seem to care about the men's absence when she got back, and she did not even realize her car was missing. The men eventually made their way back and resumed smoking meth. Stephen revealed to Chili and Alyssa that they had taken Samantha's car's battery and catalytic converter before setting it on fire. Samantha did not realize her car was gone until much later, right before they were going to leave. She asked her friend about it, but everyone laughed at her car. Samantha finally threatened to call the police on them as she grew angrier and more impatient. According to Chili, this was the point at which everything began to go wrong. Michael was aware that they would not be able to get Samantha's burned car back, and that if Samantha reported the incident to the police, they would face charges for both meth possession and vehicle theft. Michael then seized Samantha and threw her to the ground. After he repeatedly punched and kicked her until her face was covered in blood, the group loaded her into Michael's car trunk and drove around for hours while Samantha sobbed. However, her night of agony was far from over. After some time, the group reached Michael's residence. Michael gave Samantha the order to undress before they entered. Samantha's humiliation at having to enter the house nude in front of her friends was intolerable. Samantha's feet and wrists were restrained inside the home with a belt, shoelaces, and cable. Again, for hours on end, she was beaten by the group. Samantha's survival was not an option, in Chili's own words. Once more, they placed Samantha in Michael's vehicle's trunk and proceeded to the Talladega National Forest, the site of the ultimate act of this horrifying brutality. While being driven, Samantha had hurt herself trying to get out of the trunk, but the five suspects forced her back in and struck her with sticks until she stopped talking. When they arrived at the forest, they pulled her over to the tree. With the last of her strength, Samantha tried to scratch Michael's face to get away, but they caught her, hit her again, and used barbed wire to tie her to the tree. Samantha had begged them to stop during this terrible ordeal, Chili recalled, and she had promised to forgive them and never tell anyone if they let her go. However, her cruel captors disregarded her cries. Samantha had scratched Michael, so Alyssa and Chili made the decision to use a knife to remove her fingernails and toenails in order to destroy any DNA evidence that might have been gathered under her nails. The woman even took it a step further and used pliers to extract a few of her teeth. Samantha kept telling them she loved and forgives them throughout the entire scenario. After that, the group watched as Michael began to cut Samantha in various places on her body. Samantha eventually ran out of strength after being tortured for hours. At that moment, Michael stabbed Samantha in the neck, severing her throat. The graphic details that Chili and Stephen had provided, as well as the hours of suffering Samantha had gone through, unsettled the investigators. Investigators executed search warrants for Michael's vehicle and residence in an effort to bring her justice. They discovered an automobile battery in Michael's home, exactly as Chili and Stephen had said. They discovered blood-stained women's clothing in Michael's car. DNA testing using samples from Samantha's parents revealed that Samantha's body was the one discovered in the forest. Samantha's blood was also consistent with the blood on Chili and Stephen's clothing, as well as the women's clothes from Michael's car. Alyssa and Marcus, the other two suspects, were also taken into custody on November 13, 2015. Their statements were consistent with those given by Chili and Stephen. Marcus and Alyssa were placed under bond for $60,000 after being accused of first-degree kidnapping. As Stephen had informed investigators, Samantha's burned-out car was discovered beneath the Harrisburg Bridge in Bibb County, Alabama, equipped with the tangible proof and the admissions from all four suspects in Samantha's homicide. Detectives questioned Michael once more. He persisted in denying any involvement, but it soon became evident that there was sufficient evidence for the authorities to imprison him for murder. Then, when Michael allegedly called his mother to ask for advice, She reportedly advised him to be truthful. While he was incarcerated, Michael asked her to take care of his cat. Following his arrest, Michael was accused of capital murder. He was remanded without bond in detention. Investigators and prosecutors were forced to rely on the eyewitness accounts of the 4 other suspects prior to the case going to trial. Stephen and Chili had already consented to testify against Michael as important eyewitnesses and enter a guilty plea in exchange for a shorter sentence. If given the same plea agreement as Stephen, Michael consented to enter a guilty plea to the murderer. However, the prosecution flatly rejected his request. They desired the harshest penalty Alabama could offer him. Alyssa and Marcus declined the plea offers made by the prosecution, insisting instead on maintaining their innocence. Both were released from jail after paying their bonds. Judge Jim Quinn determined on December 22, 2015, that there was sufficient evidence to hold Michael Belcher, Chili Bruce, and Stephen George in custody while their cases were presented to a grand jury. The judge declared that a grand jury would hear the cases of Marcus George and Alyssa Watson during the same hearing. 18-year-old Chili Bruce entered a guilty plea to the charge of murder on January 15, 2016. She was given a 20-year prison sentence, but as a condition of the plea agreement, she would be eligible for parole in 5 years. She was also mandated to take part in the drug rehabilitation program at the Alabama Therapeutic Education Facility. Alyssa Watson and Marcus George were the first 2 to go on trial in November 2018. After rejecting the prosecution's plea deals, they both pleaded not guilty and claimed to have left the forest before Samantha's murder, but their gamble failed. Alyssa and Marcus had been involved in the entire situation, according to Chili's testimony. As proof that Alyssa and Marcus had been at the murder scene, the prosecution presented cell phone location data. Alyssa and Marcus were found guilty by the jury of first-degree kidnapping and felony murder. They were all given 30-year prison terms on December 17, 2018 for each of the charges. Later, the Alabama Court of Appeals maintained the 30-year sentence for murder, but overturned the first-degree kidnapping conviction. Alyssa was about to give birth to a boy, and Marcus was a young father whose family needed him, so their families begged for forgiveness. While Marcus apologized to Samantha's family and expressed regret for his poor decisions, Alyssa chose not to speak during the trial. But in her address to the jury, Samantha's mother, Suzanne Payne, called Alyssa and Marcus 2 of the most callous and evil non-human creatures that had ever walked the earth, and expressed her hope that they would always be haunted by Samantha's voice, pleading for mercy. Currently serving their sentences, Alyssa and Marcus are expected to be freed in 2048. With great anticipation, the trials for Michael Belcher, Stephen George, and Chili Bruce started in March 2019. Weeks after her arrest, Chili entered a guilty plea, and the jury upheld her 20-year sentence with 5 years of parole eligibility. A few days into the trial, Stephen, like Chili, entered a plea agreement and admitted to killing Samantha. He described in detail how Michael killed Samantha, and his indignant corroborated Chili's. Nonetheless, the jury concluded that he had been heavily involved in Samantha's demise. It was Stephen who proposed car theft and initiated the entire criminal activity. Therefore, the jury found Stephen guilty and gave him a life sentence in prison, even though they had promised him a reduced sentence. Thanks to the plea agreement, he barely avoided the death penalty. Michael Belcher was next in line. The prosecution made their case and portrayed Michael as the gang's ringleader. The prosecution claimed that Michael had already planned to kill Samantha after the 3 men stole her car based on the testimony of Chili and Stephen. His drug-induced rage had driven him to kill the young woman so violently out of fear of being discovered. Michael was given a death by lethal injection sentence on April 3, 2019 by Judge Brad Almond following the jury's recommendation. At the sentencing hearing, Michael expressed his sincere apologies for Samantha's ordeal, saying that words could never fully capture his sorrow and grief. But Suzanne, Samantha's mother, did not think Michael could really feel regret for what he had done. The age of 26, Chili will be released on probation in late 2023. Michael is incarcerated at home in prison on death row, and Stephen is still there for life. The sorrow of Samantha's passing will always be with her family. After Michael Belcher's trial and sentencing, Suzanne Payne talked to the media about her life without Samantha. She cried as she recalled how unique her daughter was. She was always able to find the good in everything and was quick to smile. It has been said by Samantha's parents that losing their daughter was like having no sun in the summer and no cold in the winter. Since that was also the last time they ever saw their daughter alive, they still mourn her loss every Halloween when it is her birthday. To ensure that Samantha's legacy endures, Suzanne has devoted her life to sharing her story. The risks of putting our trust in individuals who might not be acting in our best interests are brought to light by our case today. Samantha was the kind of person who did not see the negative aspects of people, which made her an easy target according to what friends and family have said about her. Ultimately, her assassins used her innocence and good nature as leverage to take her life. On November 28, 2003, Sharada Williams, a 16-year-old resident of Pennsauken Township, New Jersey, decided to treat herself to a nail appointment after the Thanksgiving holiday. Around 5 p.m., she left her home, which was conveniently just a short 5-minute walk away from the local salon where her best friend was eagerly waiting for her. Sharada assured her parents that she would return shortly, but as hours passed without any sign of her, her parents grew increasingly worried. In a state of panic, her mother began reaching out to Sharita's friends, only to discover that even her best friend had not seen her that day. The disappearance of Sharita Williams left her loved ones questioning what could have possibly happened to her. Did she lose her way? Or was there a more sinister reason behind her sudden vanishing? Pennsauken Township, located in Camden County, New Jersey, is a suburban area neighboring Philadelphia along the Delaware River. As of the 2020 United States Census, the population of this township was approximately 37,000. Known for its significant industrial park, Pennsauken houses major facilities such as a Pepsi bottling plant and the headquarters of J&J Snack Foods. The residents of Pennsauken are known for their warm and welcoming nature, creating a peaceful community. However, it is worth noting that the crime rate in Pennsauken in 2003 was higher than the national average, with 592 incidents per 100,000 people compared to the national rate of 478. Sharita Williams, a high school student, resided in Pennsauken with her family. Born on October 1, 1987, she was the beloved daughter of Harry and Wilma Williams and grew up in a nurturing home alongside her sister, Sabrina, and brother, John Henry. Sharita possessed a keen eye for the arts, particularly photography, and had a deep passion for music and dance. Monday nights were cherished moments for the Williams family, as they would come together to laugh, cry, and bond over the stories unfolding on the screen. Sharita actively participated in the youth group at Ashbury United Methodist Church in Pennsauken, where she found an outlet for her strong sense of community and compassion. Sharita, a popular junior at Pennsauken High School, possessed a deep fondness for children and eagerly embraced any opportunity to babysit for friends and relatives. Her playful nature and boundless energy endeared her to the children, who adored her in return. Sharita's strong empathy and love for her community fueled her aspiration to become a social worker and help people in need. Known for her bright and magnetic personality, she approached life with unwavering trust in the goodness of others. Sharita eagerly anticipated attending college and leaving a lasting impact on the world. Despite her big dreams, she also found joy in the simple pleasures of life, such as getting her nails, hair, and eyebrows done. On November 20th, 2003, at 5 p.m., Sharita left her home to visit a salon located just a short 5-minute walk away. Her plan was to meet her best friend there. However, the events that unfolded would forever alter the lives of those who loved her. When Sharita failed to return home at the expected time, her mother Wilma contacted her friend and was shocked to learn that they hadn't met at the salon. This revelation unsettled Wilma as her motherly intuition sensed that something was amiss. As the night wore on, Sharita's parents clung to hope, anticipating her return, but she never came back. Unable to bear the weight any longer, on November 29, 2003, Sharita's parents filed a missing person report. The Camden County Police swiftly initiated a search for Sharita in and around the salon and its vicinity. Meanwhile, her parents actively scoured the streets of Pennsauken in search of their beloved daughter. A phone call from one of Sharita's friends added to their unease, suggesting that she might be in the vicinity of 36th Street, a place she had expressed fear of passing through. Acting on this tip, Wilma and Harry promptly drove to the area, hoping to find any trace of Sharita. Shortly before 3 p.m., in the vicinity of a railroad bridge at the intersection of 36th Street and Hayes Avenue in Pennsauken, Wilmot made a distressing discovery. She noticed what appeared to be a person lying on the gravel without proper clothing. Her maternal instincts immediately kicked in, prompting her to contact the Camden County Prosecutor's Office. Detectives swiftly arrived at the scene and uncovered the truth beneath the bridge. It was a teenage girl who bore a striking resemblance to Sharita Williams. Adjacent to her was her purse, containing her identification, which confirmed her identity. Sharina was lying face up in the dirt, with her shirt torn open, pants unbuttoned, and hands bound behind her back. Although there were no visible injuries on her body, her undergarments had been forcibly removed, leaving red marks around her waist. The police had concerns that Sherita may have been subjected to sexual assault. Adding to the distressing situation, a durac was found around her neck, suggesting it may have been used to silence her cries. Additionally, 2 plastic bags from a nearby sporting goods store were discovered lodged in her mouth. One of the bags contained a receipt for a black shirt purchased at 4:28 p.m. on the same day she went missing. The devastating news of Sherita's death deeply impacted Wilma and Harry's lives, as well as sending shockwaves throughout the community. As the police and concerned neighbors gathered around the Williams residence, those who knew Sherita expressed their grief. One neighbor described her as a kind-hearted individual who did not deserve such a fate. The Camden County Police officially classified Sherita's death as a homicide and initiated an investigation into the crime scene where she was found. It was determined that Sherita had been strangled and suffocated. Furthermore, there were indications of bodily fluid stains on her jeans, suggesting a sexual assault had taken place. Despite the absence of obvious physical trauma, no knives or bullets were discovered in close proximity. However, the police did uncover some peculiar items at the scene, including a man's hair cap and a penny believed to belong to the perpetrator. The hair cap was sent to the laboratory for analysis, in hopes of finding hair strands and other potential evidence. In order to reconstruct Sherita's final movements, investigators reviewed surveillance footage from the nail salon in Pennsauken that she frequently visited. The footage revealed that she was at the salon at 6:05 p.m., getting her eyebrows done. Subsequently, the detectives examined credit card receipts, interviewed customers of the salon, and questioned individuals who may have been present at the crime scene. Unfortunately, no significant breakthrough was made, and the identity of the killer remained elusive. The detectives became intrigued by how Wilma and Harry had known to search near the bridge. Wilma explained that while she was making calls to find Sherita, one of her friends had mentioned the 36th Street Bridge, stating that Sherita had expressed fear about crossing it. Harry believed that this friend might possess additional information about his daughter, prompting the detectives to focus on this new lead and approach Sherita's friend for an interview. The friend claimed that she had mentioned the 36th Street location to Wilma on a hunch, as Sherita sometimes took that route to visit her boyfriend. Additionally, the police discovered that Sherita had made a call to her boyfriend in Camden from a nearby payphone around 6:30 p.m., just before her disappearance. The police located the boyfriend and spoke to him in the presence of his mother. He confirmed that Sherita had visited him that night at around 6:30 p.m., but he had been asleep in his bedroom due to his night shift work as a security guard and had not seen her. His mother admitted to speaking to Sherita at the door, but not allowing her inside because she did not like her. Despite tagging the boyfriend as a suspect, the detectives lacked physical evidence linking him to the crime scene, and he also passed a lie detector test successfully. Eventually, he was cleared of suspicion. Following this setback, the detectives meticulously reevaluated the evidence, with a particular focus on the t-shirt receipt found in the plastic bag. It was determined that the receipt was from the Model sports goods store in the Sherry Hill Mall. However, upon their visit to the store, they encountered yet another obstacle. The surveillance cameras at the establishment had malfunctioned on the evening of November 28th, leaving no available footage. In light of this setback, the detectives decided to pursue a lead they had received as a tip. An unidentified individual claimed to have seen one of Sherita's male friends driving near the bridge on the night of the murder, suggesting that Sherita may have been in his car. Interestingly, this male friend happened to be dating one of Sherita's acquaintances, and rumors circulated that he had feelings for Sherita. Given that Sherita had used a payphone, investigators speculated that she may have called this friend for a ride, unaware of his romantic interest in her. Consequently, the friend was summoned to the police station for an interview. Although he appeared nervous, he cooperated with the authorities. He openly admitted his fondness for Sherita and acknowledged driving her around the area on previous occasions. However, he vehemently denied being with her on the night of the murder, claiming that he had picked up his girlfriend from her job at the mall and returned home directly. While his alibi lacked solidity, was no concrete evidence linking him to the crime, resulting in his eventual clearance. After 3 months of no new leads, a breakthrough finally occurred. The crime lab successfully extracted a DNA sample from a bodily fluid stain found on Sherita's clothing. Immediately, the police initiated the collection of DNA samples from individuals acquainted with Sherita, hoping to find a match. Additionally, samples were obtained from male suspects, Unfortunately, all these efforts failed to yield a match. Determined to make progress, the detectives took an extra step by running the DNA sample through CODIS, the FBI's national crime database. Once again, this avenue proved fruitless as no match was found. Despite the dwindling leads and the case growing cold, Sharita's parents refused to lose hope. Her father, Harry, persisted in contacting the police every week to stay updated on the case's progress. Even the police officers involved remained dedicated to finding justice for Sharita. In March 2007, a significant breakthrough occurred. For years after Sharita's murder, the police made a startling discovery. A new individual had been added to CODIS, and their DNA matched the bodily fluid sample found on Sharita's genes. This revelation led them to a 22-year-old man named Warren Dixon, who was previously unknown to anyone involved in the case. Upon further investigation, it was revealed that Warren had attended the same school as Sharita after transferring from Camden High to Pensacon High. Interestingly, Warren, who was 18 at the time of Sharita's murder, had dropped out of school shortly after the tragic event and relocated to Pennsylvania. 2 years later, he was arrested on drug charges, which resulted in his details being entered into the CODIS database. Notably, Warren lived just 2 blocks away from the bridge on 36th Street, indicating his proximity to the crime scene. The police speculated that he may have intercepted Sharita on that fateful night after she left her boyfriend's house. Tracking down Warren was relatively easy for the police, as he had returned to New Jersey and was required to attend weekly probation meetings. They approached him during one of these meetings and requested his presence for a police interview. Throughout the questioning, Warren remained outwardly calm, although he seemed to struggle with social interaction. He admitted to knowing Sharita during high school, but claimed to have only learned about her murder through the news. However, when confronted with the presence of his DNA at the crime scene, he confessed to having intimate contact with Sharita on the night of November 28, 2003. The authorities then presented Warren with the hair cap found at the crime scene, without disclosing its origin. Initially, Warren provided evasive answers, but eventually admitted that the hair cap belonged to him. Additionally, Warren displayed an unusual level of interest in the case, constantly posing peculiar questions to the detectives. During a particular moment, he inquired, "If I were to unintentionally do this, would I still be required to face imprisonment?" In a subsequent interrogation with the police, Warren finally admitted his guilt. He confessed to intercepting Sharita on the night of the murder and making unwanted advances towards her, which she rejected. This led to a violent escalation that tragically resulted in her death. The exact motive behind Warren placing the 2 plastic bags in Sharita's mouth remained unclear. Despite a lab report in January 2009 that showed no match between Warren's hair and the strands found on the cap, authorities believed they had sufficient probable cause and evidence to charge him based on his confession. In January 2009, Warren Dixon was apprehended and charged with aggravated manslaughter in a New Jersey Superior Court. During his arraignment, the judge set his bail at $750,000. Sharita Williams' family attended the court proceedings to share their memories of Sharita and display photographs documenting her life from infancy. "I want the court to truly understand who she was, to witness her growth," emotionally stated Harry Williams. Warren displayed uncooperative behavior in court, refusing to stand when ordered by the judge and requiring deputies to forcefully remove him from his chair at one point. He remained unresponsive, only answering one question regarding legal representation. The final trial commenced in March 2011. Warren Dixon, 25 years old at the time, pleaded guilty to attempted aggravated assault and aggravated manslaughter. The Williams family was present to witness their daughter finally receive justice after 7 long years of sorrow and unanswered inquiries. Sharita's mother and Aunt wore buttons adorned with Sharita's image during the court proceedings. On June 3, 2011, Superior Court Judge Samuel Nettle sent his warrant to 20 years in prison, specifying that he would only be eligible for parole after serving 85% of this sentence. Additionally, Warren would be subject to lifetime community supervision and listed in New Jersey's Registry of Convicted Sex Offenders. Currently, official records indicate that he is currently incarcerated at East Jersey State Prison and will be eligible for parole in 2026. Following the trial, Harry Sharita's father expressed his concern as to why Warren would be granted parole when his daughter was gone forever. He firmly believed that Warren should have received a life sentence instead. Despite his grief, Harry expressed gratitude towards the Camden County Police and the entire community for their efforts in bringing justice. He acknowledged that it was a collective endeavor involving the media, family, prosecutor's office, and friends, and he considered the conclusion of this saga. Throughout the years, Harry developed a connection with Surgeon Martin Wolfe from the prosecutor's office, who served as the lead investigator in the case. Whenever Harry reached out to inquire about the case or simply to share his grief, Wolfe always paid attention. Wolfe dedicated more time to solving this murder than any other case during his 17 years in law enforcement. When Detective John Greer took over the case in 2008 due to Wolfe's military deployment, Harry was overcome with emotions. However, Greer remained determined and motivated by the Williams family's unwavering resolve. The family organized annual marches to the 36th Street Bridge, where Sharita's body was discovered, which served as a source of encouragement for Greer. It was this dedication that ultimately led to the resolution of the cold case. Harry made it a point to contact the Camden County Prosecutor's Office every Monday, seeking answers and requesting meetings, ensuring that the tragedy of Sharita's murder would never be forgotten. In a subsequent interview with the media, Harry directed his message to teenage viewers, emphasizing the importance of not blindly trusting everyone they meet, as hidden motives may exist. He described Sharita as a loving and gentle person who trusted everyone and never anticipated anyone would cause her harm. He recalled her reassuring words on the last night she left home, saying, "I'm 16, Dad. I'll be fine." Pursuing higher education had always been a part of Sharita's aspirations for the future, before her life was tragically cut short. To pay tribute to her memory, Pennsauken High School bestowed Sharita with a posthumous diploma. 17-year-old Gladys Arellano lived in Boyle Heights, Los Angeles in 1996. She was beautiful, intelligent, and had big dreams for her life. Gladys was last seen on January 28, 1996, leaving her home. When she failed to return home later in the day, she was reported missing by her family. 2 days later, her body was found off a main road in a ravine in Topanga Canyon. She had been assaulted and strangled. Serology evidence was collected from her body, and a DNA profile of the unknown offender was uploaded to the state and federal DNA databases, but a match could not be found. An extensive investigation was completed by the investigators at the time, but it led nowhere and the case went cold until 2019. When Los Angeles police arrested a man by the name of Jose Luis Garcia for domestic assault. During the booking process, DNA swabs were taken from Garcia and processed. Investigators then realized that his DNA matched the DNA that was taken from Gladys Arellano's body. Detectives visited Garcia and questioned him about Gladys. The crime took place when he was just 19 years old. They obtained a second DNA swab from him. The Los Angeles Crime Lab was then able to confirm that Garcia's genetic profile matched the unidentified sample taken from Gladys's body in 1996. 43-year-old Jose Luis Garcia was arrested by U.S. Marshals on September 29, 2019 in Dallas, Texas. He was extradited on October 14 to Los Angeles County, where he was held on a $1 million bail. Detective Hugo Rienarga said this case is typical of the type of unsolved cases that the detectives are faced with on a daily basis. We are gratified that we are successful in bringing this tragic case to a close. Rienarga confirmed that investigators were looking into the possibility that Garcia was involved in other crimes as well. Gladys Arellano's niece and goddaughter, Samantha Moreno, spoke movingly of the need to remember her godmother, as well as all other women who were victims of violence. Recognizing her life is important. Beautiful Latina souls from Boyle Heights should never be forgotten. Moreno said acts of violence against women should never be forgotten. Samantha Moreno thanked the detectives who never lost sight of finding justice. Gladys Arellano's case was worked on by retired detectives Joe Purcell and Sean McCarthy, who both work part-time on the Sheriff's Department's Unsolved Case Unit. Thank you for not giving up on our Gladys, who is a loving daughter, sister, aunt, and godmother. Gladys was only 17 when her life was taken. She had a beautiful soul. She was beautiful, intelligent, gorgeous, and she had a radiant smile. She had such big dreams for her life. My grandparents would have been so proud of her, Samantha Moreno said. She was grateful Garcia was off the streets after nearly a quarter century. We want nothing more than for him to pay for his brutal crime, she said. We recognize that this will not bring Gladys back, but we are relieved to know that there will be justice for Gladys. This is a victory that we acknowledge in her honor, and we look forward to more victories. Jose Luis Garcia was found guilty of all the charges against him on July 18, 2023. It was a day the loved ones of Gladys Arellano had been waiting decades for. "It is never enough for having taken the life of such a beautiful soul," said Elizabeth Orellano, Gladys Orellano's sister and best friend. She told the court what Garcia did nearly destroyed them as they wondered for more than 25 years what happened to her. "It was tough, but it felt really good to finally get it off your chest and actually like seeing him and, releasing it and having some kind of comfort," said Vanessa Orellano, Gladys Orellano's younger sister. Janet Ramirez, Gladys' close friend, said the plea deal gives her some comfort, but it is not enough. 19 years is never enough, but I have comfort knowing now she can rest, that the perpetrator is going to be behind bars because for 25 years, I've lived with the guilt of not knowing what I could have done different, Ramirez said. Jose Luis Garcia was sentenced on August 15, 2023 to 18 years and 8 months in prison for taking Gladys Orellano's life. Garcia pleaded no contest to voluntary manslaughter, kidnapping, and domestic assault. According to the district attorney's office, he waived his credit for the just over 1,000 days he has spent in jail since his 2020 arrest. Retired Sheriff's Detective Joe Purcell, who handled the cold case investigation, said, "The fact is that we can give justice to people and to society. It is really important not to let these cases go unresolved. We need to have people pay the debt they owe to society." The disappearance of a first-year student from a renowned university following a sports event where her car and keys were found abandoned in the parking lot raised concerns among her loved ones. Despite initial assumptions by the authorities that she had voluntarily left, her family and friends were convinced that a sinister event had taken place. After more than a decade of uncertainty, the long-awaited truth finally emerged. Shannon Melendi was born in Miami, USA on October 20, 1974. 5 years later, her parents welcomed their second daughter, Monique. The girls were raised with a strong emphasis on the importance of receiving a quality education. This upbringing greatly influenced Shannon, who excelled academically from an early age while also actively participating in various clubs and activities. In high school, she developed a keen interest in pursuing a career in politics or law. Leading the school debate club, Shannon even had the opportunity to deliver speeches at the U.S. Congress and the United Nations General Assembly. These experiences solidified her decision to work towards a position on the Supreme Court. To achieve this goal, Shannon applied to several prestigious universities across the country. Despite receiving offers from all of them due to her outstanding academic record and extracurricular achievements, she ultimately chose Emory University in Atlanta, Georgia. The university's reputation as one of the top 20 in the nation, coupled with a generous annual grant of $15,000 for the first 4 years of study, made it an ideal choice for Shannon. Following her graduation, she relocated to Atlanta to pursue a degree in political science. Shannon quickly adapted to university life, forming lasting friendships and even taking on a part-time job at a nearby softball field. Unfortunately, due to a mistake made by her supervisor, Shannon had to resign from her position. On March 26, 1994, on that particular morning, a different employee was initially assigned to keep score, but due to an accidental scheduling error, the young woman stepped in and agreed to work the game. Shannon arrived at the stadium around 8:40 a.m., and 4 hours later her shift came to an end. Typically after work, she would make a quick stop at a nearby gas station to purchase a soda. However, on that day she left as usual but mysteriously disappeared thereafter. The stadium management anticipated her return after halftime to submit her scorecard, but she never showed up. Concerned, her friend and roommate Athena was the first to raise the alarm. Initially worried when Shannon failed to return to their dorm in the evening, Athena contacted Shannon's parents to inquire if they had heard from her. With no news from Shannon, Athena confided in 2 mutual friends about the situation, and together they embarked on a search. Their search led them to the stadium where Shannon worked, and there they made a troubling discovery. Approaching a nearby gas station, they were surprised to find Shannon's car parked there. It was a black Nissan 280SX, a gift from her parents. The car was empty, with the keys in the ignition and the doors unlocked, causing further concern. Knowing Shannon's attachment to her car, they feared the worst and promptly contacted the authorities. The officers who arrived on the scene handled the situation in a manner that was less than ideal. They conducted a brief inspection of the car and concluded that there was no evidence of a possible crime. Since there was no blood or signs of struggle in the car, the officers simply advised her friends not to worry. They did not even take fingerprints off the steering wheel and doors. Additionally, they instructed Athena to take the car to the university parking lot, which she did. The officers also spoke to the gas station attendants, who confirmed that they had seen Shannon around noon the previous day, did not notice anything suspicious. The official police version was that, given the absence of signs of blood or struggle in the car, Shannon had likely run away. Due to her age, the case was not taken seriously. Shannon's parents decided to go to Atlanta to participate in the search after learning that the police were unwilling to investigate their daughter's disappearance. They were successful in getting the Federal Bureau of Investigation involved in the case after reaching out to Jimmy Carter and Senator Bob Graham. They printed and posted thousands of flyers about Shannon's disappearance and even rented a billboard, offering a reward for any information that would help find her. Detectives identified several suspects among Shannon's acquaintances, but quickly ruled them out. 3 days after Shannon disappeared, something interesting happened. An unknown individual contacted the authorities through the hotline number provided on the flyers regarding Shannon's disappearance. The caller pointed out an error in the initial report made by the media, stating that Shannon was wearing blue shorts on the day she went missing, not green as previously mentioned. Additionally, the caller claimed to have Shannon in his possession and threatened to keep her for an indefinite period. Despite the seriousness of the situation, the call was not given the necessary attention. Law enforcement continued to believe that Shannon had voluntarily left even after the caller admitted to kidnapping her. It wasn't until a second call was made on April 6th to the university's counseling center that the situation took a different turn. The caller assured that Shannon was safe and promised to contact authorities later to discuss her release. Furthermore, he mentioned leaving Shannon's ring at a specific location to validate his claims. The Federal Bureau of Investigation promptly traced the call to a payphone near a Burger King restaurant in suburban Atlanta. Upon investigation, Shannon's ring was found in a baggie wrapped in duct tape at the specified location. Her parents positively identified the ring, bringing them a sense of relief as they hoped to reunite with their daughter. Subsequently, law enforcement reclassified the case as a kidnapping, appointing a new lead detective who criticized the previous investigators for their unprofessional conduct, such as failing to collect fingerprints from Shannon's car and allowing a stranger to move the vehicle to another location. Afterwards, they also did very little, if anything at all, to investigate the case, as they believed the young woman had simply left and would return soon. With this in mind, investigators made the decision to start fresh and pursue every lead available. Their initial focus was on the softball field where Shannon was last seen before her disappearance. The situation was further complicated by the fact that several weeks had passed since she went missing. Moreover, a championship game was taking place on the field that day, attracting hundreds of visitors and participants. The detectives made an effort to interview as many people as possible, encouraging them to remember any suspicious incidents during the game. Surprisingly, many individuals shared the same account. The only unusual occurrence at the game was the referee's behavior. Players and stadium staff reported that he was neglectful of his duties, constantly distracted and frequently trying to engage Shannon in conversation. The referee, whose name was Colvin Hinton but preferred to be called Butch, was a 33-year-old mechanic at the local Delta Airlines who refereed matches as a hobby. He was married, taught Sunday school, and appeared harmless. As the detectives delved deeper, discovered that Butch had left the softball field around the same time as Shannon. Upon speaking with his colleagues, they learned another peculiar detail. The day before the game, Butch had asked his fellow umpires to cover for him as he had a date planned. Despite knowing he was married, Butch claimed his wife was out of town. When his colleagues declined, he contacted his boss and requested to leave the game early, citing a family emergency involving his brother's wife. The man clarified that his brother's wife was hospitalized, leaving him as the only option to care for the children. On that particular day, Butch came back to the stadium 2 hours later, still dressed in his officiating attire. After changing in the locker room, he left. Hours later, he returned to the stadium and was seen by a colleague. When questioned about his presence, Butch mentioned forgetting to hand over his paycheck to the accounting department, despite not having it with him. Additionally, he inquired about the location of his parked car, which seemed odd considering his recent arrival. Investigators interrogated Butch, who denied any connection to the disappearance of the young woman. He claimed to have gone straight home after leaving the club, supporting his statement with outgoing calls from his phone shortly after departing the stadium. Although he consented to a polygraph test, Butch failed it, with most of his responses being labeled as false. While this wasn't sufficient for an arrest, it did lead to a search warrant for his residence, conveniently situated near the burger joint where the Shannon ring was discovered. Detectives uncovered two peculiar incidents. reports from neighbors about a fire lit by Butch in the early morning following Shannon's disappearance, and a request to his father for a handsaw to deal with a tree supposedly falling on his car. Despite searching with service dogs, no evidence of Shannon was found at his house. However, a startling find awaited them on the property. 3 areas with disturbed soil containing numerous women's clothing items, shoes, a sleeping bag, and softball field scorecards carefully examined the unearthed garments, presented images to Shannon's parents, and determined that none of them belonged to the young woman. Butch himself claimed ignorance about the origins of the hidden spots on his property, assuming they were remnants from the previous owners of the house. The authorities found themselves in a difficult position. While many facts seemed to implicate Butch in Shannon's vanishing, there was no direct evidence against him. They were hopeful that a more thorough inspection of the young woman's vehicle would yield results, but unfortunately, no fingerprints or DNA samples were collected on the initial day of the investigation. Despite the efforts of the experts, they were unable to locate any. But they did reach an intriguing conclusion. The car had been meticulously wiped clean, erasing any potential traces. In a bid to gather concrete proof against Butch, one of the detectives uncovered a fascinating detail. Upon examining the bay where the Shannon ring was found, it was revealed that such items were not produced for general sale. Upon contacting the manufacturer, it was discovered that the sole purchaser of such bags in Georgia was Delta Airlines. Company confirmed that the bags were utilized by mechanics to store small airplane components. Notably, Butch was employed as a mechanic at that very company. Furthermore, the detectives combed through every detail so thoroughly that they discovered another small clue in Butch's vehicle. A fragment of the same duct tape used to wrap the pouch was found, with microscopic particles of the same metal detected on it. Analysis of the composition led to the conclusion that this compound was exclusive to the aviation industry. Despite these findings, the case remained unsolved for several months. Both the authorities and Shannon's parents were convinced of Butch's involvement in the young woman's disappearance, yet no concrete evidence could substantiate their suspicions. All the proof available was purely circumstantial. Upon learning of the suspicions surrounding the man, the airline promptly terminated his employment. Prior to this, he had boastfully joked with his coworkers about being a suspect in a woman's kidnapping case. Upon delving into his background, investigators uncovered Butch's extensive criminal record. This information was not initially known due to the lack of sophisticated criminal databases in the 90s. It was revealed that Butch's criminal activities began when he was a minor. Despite his young age, he attempted to tie up his boss's wife during a part-time job. However, she managed to convince him to leave without alerting anyone. Butch was apprehended, but due to his age, he was only subjected to involuntary psychiatric treatment. Shockingly, he confessed to his intentions of harming the woman. His next offense involved the abduction of a 14-year-old girl when he was in his 20s and married. Pretending to be accompanied by his brother, he lured the girl to his home and locked her in the basement. Fortunately, his wife discovered the victim and contacted the authorities. Despite the victim's claims of abuse, Butch received a mere 4-year prison sentence. The victim also disclosed that Butch had threatened her with the same fate as his previous victims if she did not comply with his demands. Less than 2 years after being released early, Butch remarried. His new wife was completely unaware of his criminal past. The police suspected that Butch had committed more crimes than they knew of. Evidence of buried women's clothing suggested that there may have been other victims who did not survive. Despite Shannon's investigators' efforts, they were unable to bring any charges against Butch. However, luck was on their side when Butch, while in prison, hinted to fellow inmates about his involvement in Shannon's case. One inmate, Cornwell, recalled Butch waking up in tears one night, claiming that he did not kill Shannon. It was the demons inside him. Butch even asked about the chances of being convicted of murder without the victim's body being found. Another inmate revealed that Butch confessed to leaving the softball field with Shannon and criticized the police for not properly examining her car. He chillingly mentioned that Shannon's body would never be found as it had been scattered in the wind. This crucial testimony, along with other circumstantial evidence, finally led to Butch's arrest in August 2004 for kidnapping and murder charges related to Shannon's case. It was believed that Butch saw Shannon at a gas station, lured her into his car, and then threatened her to drive to his house, possibly using a knife as he had in previous crimes. Subsequently, he confined her in the residence and then proceeded to the stadium, leaving the young lady's vehicle at the gas station. He left the keys in the ignition, removed all fingerprints, and departed. Upon his return home, He could have mistreated the young woman, ended her life, and disposed of her remains. A small number of individuals have faith in the court's ability to convict. The saying, "no body, no case," is widely recognized, and in most instances it holds true, demonstrating that an individual committed a homicide without the victim's body is exceedingly challenging. Up to that point, there had not been a single instance in Georgia where a court had convicted someone without a body. Nevertheless, investigators made significant efforts to extract as much information as possible from the circumstantial evidence available. They even brought inmates to the trial who had overheard allusions to Shannon's murder from Butch. He vehemently maintained his innocence, and following the trial, the jury deliberated for 3 full days without reaching a verdict. Eventually, they reached a decision and declared Butch guilty of murder. Consequently, he received a life sentence from the court. At the time, he was 43 years old, and theoretically, he was supposed to spend the remainder of his life incarcerated. However, there was one troubling detail. The perpetrator was entitled to apply for parole every 7 years as per the laws in effect. The time of the crime, Butch attempted to contest the court's ruling, but his efforts were in vain. 2 years later, in 2006, an unexpected turn of events occurred. He chose to admit to the murder. His account closely mirrored that of the prosecution. He encountered Shannon in the parking lot and proposed they grab a meal at Burger King. Shannon accepted, and they drove there in his vehicle. After having lunch, they headed back to the field. However, Butch missed the correct turn, halted the car, and claimed to have a leg cramp. He requested Shannon to drive and move to the back seat. It was there that he produced a premeditated knife and threatened to compel the young woman to drive to his residence. Butch restrained her and assured her that he had no intention of causing harm. He simply wanted to sell her vehicle before releasing her. Despite being tied up, she remained composed, did not attempt to raise an alarm or resist, allowing him to leave her in that state. Subsequently, he drove her car to a gas station and left the keys inside, hoping that it would be stolen to divert the attention of law enforcement. After meticulously erasing any potential fingerprints, he returned home, mistreated Shannon, and then left for the cinema with his nephews and their parents, using the outing as an alibi. Upon his return, he mistreated her again, promising to set her free once he had sold her car. As he began to comprehend the severity of his actions, he struggled to determine his next course of action. Eventually, he strangled her in her home, claiming she was asleep at the time and that it happened swiftly. He deliberated for hours on how to dispose of the body, ultimately opting to burn it in a large fire. Following this, he attended a church service, returning home to find that the fire had obliterated any evidence. He attributed his confession to the overwhelming burden of guilt, although his actions cast doubt on his sincerity. Notably, he made misleading calls to authorities claiming the victim was alive, even after disposing of her remains. Additionally, he planned to abduct another woman, his wife's close friend, on the same day his wife was away. But the friend's refusal averted a tragedy. Is it possible to consider any feelings of regret and remorse on the part of Butch? Furthermore, he claimed that the fire had completely incinerated the body within a few hours, a statement that seems highly unlikely. Upon returning from church, Shannon was nowhere to be found. Allegedly, he waited for the ashes to cool, collected them, and disposed of them on the railroad tracks. It is probable that he fabricated this story and actually buried the remains, including the bones, elsewhere. The only plausible explanation is that Butch realized he may never be released and decided to feign remorse. However, revealing the burial site could have impacted his sentence and hindered his chances of seeking parole. Despite evidence of fuel found by experts, he continues to claim that the fire was caused by a broken vacuum cleaner. Currently incarcerated, his next parole hearing is scheduled for 2025 when he will be 64 years old. Shannon's parents are determined to prevent his release. Investigators are left wondering whose possessions were buried in Butch's backyard and if he may have been involved in the deaths of other young women, possibly numbering in the dozens. Case of Rowan Ford. Rowan Ford was born on April 11, 1998, in San Diego, California. Her parents divorced when she was young, and her mother, Colleen, moved with her to a small town called Stella in Missouri. Later, her mom met a man named David, and they got married. Colleen had several children from a previous marriage, and soon after their wedding, she and David had a daughter together. Altogether, Rowan had 2 sisters and 2 brothers, and they shared a very close bond. She spent a lot of time outdoors, riding her bike around town, enjoying swimming, and indulging in her passion for drawing. She also liked going to Sunday school at the local church, where she always volunteered to help other kids who had some issues with their tasks. In November 2007, when Rowan was 9 years old, she was in a 4th grade at the local elementary school. Her mom worked the night shift at a store while her stepdad spent most of the day on the farm, which made Rowan often fend for herself, making her very independent. On November 2nd, she stayed home alone as usual. Her mom went to work and her stepdad hadn't returned from the farm yet. The next morning, around 9 a.m. Colleen came home from her night shift and checked Rowan's room. But her daughter wasn't there. She asked her husband where her daughter was, and he said she had asked him if she could have a sleepover at a friend's house, and he had let her go. He didn't even ask the friend's name because their town was very small, and he wasn't worried about anything happening to her. But Colleen started to worry and decided to check with all of Rowan's friends. Since there were only a few streets in their town, it didn't take long, but none of them had seen her, and she hadn't stayed over at any of their houses, which made her mother even more concerned. Colleen searched the whole town but couldn't find her daughter. She went back home and told her husband that Rowan was nowhere to be found. She asked him to call the police and report her missing, but he reassured her that everything was fine and that she would come home soon. After waiting for several more hours with no sign of Rowan, Colleen took matters into her own hands and dialed 911 herself. The local sheriff immediately organized a search operation. He went to their house to speak with David, and as he was the last person to see Rowan before she disappeared, David said that on that evening, while he was working on the farm with his colleague Christopher, their mutual friend Nathan came by. They all decided to go to David's place to have some drinks and play pool. They stopped by the store, bought some alcohol, and went to David's house, where they spent several hours. Later in the night, Christopher asked Nathan to drive him home to the neighboring town, where his trailer was. They persuaded David to join them to continue the fun. Before leaving the house, he checked on Rowan in her room. Seeing that she was asleep, David left with his friends, and they stopped by the store again to grab more alcohol and headed to Christopher's trailer, where they continued drinking for about an hour. After that, David decided to head home and asked Nathan to give him a ride. Nathan agreed, but chose to take back roads instead of the main highway. By that time, Nathan was quite drunk and didn't want to risk encountering the police. Nathan dropped David off and drove home. David went straight to bed. Soon after, he was awakened by Rowan, who asked if she could sleep over at a friend's house. Without much thought, he agreed and fell back asleep. Police approached the story with some skepticism. What puzzled them most was the fact that a 9-year-old girl decided to go to her friend's house in the middle of the night, and her stepfather let her go without even asking which friend she was talking about. The sheriff considered that David might be hiding something or directly involved in Rowan's disappearance, but he had no evidence to support this theory. Police searched the town and its surroundings until late at night. Local residents immediately joined the search, as they all knew Rowan's family and wanted to help. The population of Stella was only about 150 people, so news of her disappearance spread throughout the county. People were used to being able to let their children play outside without a worry, as nothing ever happened in such a quiet place. But now that Rowan vanished without a trace, and the police were unable to find her for a whole day, the residents of Stella were in a state of panic. The search for Rowan yielded no results on the first day. However, the investigation progressed on November 4th, when the police spoke with Christopher in a neighboring town. He corroborated David's account, but revealed that David had not contacted him to inform him of Rowan's disappearance. Christopher stated he had not spoken with Rowan or her friends since that evening. Despite an expanded search with more volunteers, the police failed to find Rowan or any clues about her disappearance. The following day, the FBI joined the investigation while the local police continued searching the town and surrounding areas. As a result of growing skepticism towards David's account, detectives started focusing on a potential abduction. They spoke with all of Rowan's friends and verified that none of them had seen her on the night she went missing. As investigators questioned David, his account raised even more suspicions. David's details were inconsistent and contradictory. He altered the timeline of his whereabouts that night on multiple occasions. Additionally, David speculates that it is possible that Rowan left without his permission, which makes his story even more suspicious. During their investigation, FBI agents found out that David had borrowed his mother's car on the night of Rowan's disappearance, a detail he initially left out when questioned by the police. This new information led the authorities to seize both his mother's car and his own pickup truck for forensic examination. But unfortunately, no evidence was discovered. As part of the investigation, detectives wanted to speak with Christopher and Nathan again. since both had been with David that evening. Christopher was invited to the police station for further questioning, where he recounted the same story as before. He also agreed to take a polygraph test, which showed no signs of dishonesty. After leaving the police station and returning to work, Christopher noticed Sheriff Clark's car and signaled for him to stop. As the sheriff of Witten, where Christopher lived, Clark had known him since childhood. Sheriff Clark was close friends with Christopher's foster parents and was someone Christopher had always looked up to and sought advice from in times of need. Sheriff Clark met with Christopher to discuss Rowan's disappearance. Although familiar with the case, Clark hadn't been directly involved since the investigation was led by the Stella Department. During their conversation, Clark noticed that Christopher was acting strangely, which led him to suspect that Christopher might be hiding something. Given the gravity of the situation and Rowan's uncertain fate, Clark shared his concerns with the FBI. His call prompted investigators to consider the possibility that Christopher might be withholding crucial information that could link Rowan's stepfather to her disappearance. They wondered if Christopher's actions were directed by Rowan's stepfather to lie, and whether Christopher feared being seen as an accomplice if he told the truth. Sheriff Clark told the FBI agents that he had a close relationship with Christopher and offered to help persuade him to cooperate. That evening, Christopher visited Colleen's house to ask about the search progress. FBI agents also arrived to speak with Colleen again and saw Christopher there. They asked him questions and he repeated his previous account. However, Christopher then mentioned for the first time that he didn't rule out David's possible involvement in Rowan's disappearance. He expressed his willingness to help uncover the truth, even if it was terrible, and suggested wearing a wire to talk to David and try to get him to confess. The detectives decided against this approach. Instead, they asked Christopher to suggest locations where David might have hidden Rowan's body. Christopher provided several locations, which the police searched the next morning. Meanwhile, FBI agents questioned David again, but he continued to deny any involvement. Detectives searched Christopher's home for leads, but the search yielded no results. Meanwhile, Christopher visited the sheriff's office to discuss his encounter with the FBI with Clark. During their conversation, the sheriff sensed that Christopher was holding back information. After their meeting, Clark reached out to the detectives again, suggesting that Christopher might be withholding crucial information that helped prove David's involvement in the case. The FBI agents asked the sheriff to persuade Christopher to open up, as he had been in regular contact with Clark to discuss the case. It seemed that Christopher wanted to share important details but was hesitant to do so for unknown reasons. The following day, November 7th, the police asked Christopher to return to the station. They requested his permission to search a safe located in David's house, where Christopher had been living temporarily and still had some belongings. Christopher agreed to the search and also allowed the police to search his trailer and car. Additionally, Christopher voluntarily provided a DNA sample and agreed to answer the detectives' questions again. During the questioning, he was asked to confirm David's story, but this time revealed that his friend's account was not entirely accurate. The investigators then pressed him to disclose what really happened that evening. Christopher became agitated when the police treated him like a suspect in Rowan's disappearance. He refused to continue the conversation and left the station after warning the detectives that he might hire a lawyer. Later that evening, Christopher met with Sheriff Clark to express his concerns about the detective's behavior. Clark acknowledged Christopher's right to remain silent, but explained that the police were doing everything possible to find Rowan. Christopher stated that he would no longer cooperate with the detectives and would only speak with Clark if he had any further information to share. Clark continued to encourage Christopher to open up, and eventually, Christopher broke down in tears, claiming that he loved Rowan and would never harm her. During his time living with the David family, Christopher formed a close bond with Rowan and the other children. They grew to treat him like one of their own, even affectionately referring to him as Uncle Christopher. Sheriff Clark realized that Christopher was on the verge of revealing crucial information. But just as he was about to open up, a visitor arrived at the police station, briefly distracting Clark and causing Christopher to leave. Sheriff Clark reached out to the FBI, updating them on his conversation with Christopher. Clark explained that Christopher was almost ready to disclose what he knew, but warned that pressuring him too hard could lead to him becoming defensive and seeking the help of a lawyer. Clark recommended giving Christopher time to reflect, and the detectives agreed. The search for Rowan continued the following day but yielded no results. However, a new clue came on November 9th, exactly 1 week after her disappearance. Search teams converged on a remote area near the town of Powell, about 10 miles from Stella, and made a significant discovery in the fields and woods, a large pit in the ground. When authorities searched the area, they found Roland's body hidden under leaves and debris. She was not wearing any clothing from the waist down except for a pair of stockings. A medical examination revealed signs of strangulation and evidence of a sexual assault. After the discovery, FBI agents reached out to Sheriff Clark, asking him to speak with Christopher again, hoping Christopher would now be more forthcoming. Sheriff Clark learned that earlier that morning, Christopher had visited the station, looking for him, and told other officers that he needed to speak with Clark urgently. Sheriff Clark then began searching for Christopher, checking all his usual locations, but he was nowhere to be found. This continued until Christopher contacted Sheriff Clark himself, sounding distressed and asking if he was being followed. Christopher explained that after hearing about Rowan's body, he had driven around town to clear his head and noticed a gray car following him. Sheriff Clark assures Christopher that he knows nothing about the surveillance and suggests they meet in person. When they met, Christopher appeared nervous and expressed concerns for his safety. He feared that with Rowan's body found, he might be accused of murder and that someone might seek revenge against him. Clark took Christopher to the police station, and he said that now, when the case had been classified as a homicide, it was time for Christopher to reveal everything he knew. However, when Clark asked Christopher to share what David had done to Rowan, Christopher became emotional and hesitant to talk at the station. He explained that there were too many people around and suggested they move to a quieter location. Clark agreed, and they drove to a small bridge a few miles outside of town. Once they arrived, Christopher asked Clark to handcuff him. Clark was surprised but tried to reassure Christopher that it wasn't necessary. Christopher insists that what he is about to say will change everything and that Clark will then have to arrest him. Christopher then began recounting the events of that night. He told Clark that he, Nathan, and David had gone to his trailer to continue drinking. Later, his friends decided it was time to head home. Nathan gave David a ride, and they chose to take back roads to avoid the police. Christopher had shocked Clark that he had intended to sexually assault Rowan. To carry out his plan, Christopher took advantage of the time when his friends were busy taking a detour through the field. He drove straight to David's house via the main highway. Under the cover of darkness, he slipped into Rowan's room, picked her up, and quietly transported her to his vehicle, carefully avoiding detection as she slept. When they reached his trailer, he sexually assaulted Rowan. This was interrupted when Rowan regained consciousness and tried her best to free herself, but to no avail. During the crime, Christopher took precautions to avoid recognition, deliberately choosing to keep the lights off and maintain his silence. He originally planned to return Rowan to her home under the guise of innocence, but under the illumination of a bright moon, Rowan finally laid eyes on Christopher as he transported her from the trailer. He grabbed a rope, resorted to force to resolve his predicament, and took Rowan's life with his bare hands. He frantically thought of ways to cover up his crime. He got in his car and began driving around the county, pondering methods of disposing of the body. He then remembered a large pit near a neighboring town and headed in that direction. When he arrived, he dumped Rowan's body in the hole and attempted to cover it with tree branches. Returning to the trailer, Christopher discovered traces of Rowan's blood on his clothes and mattress. He also realized he needed to dispose of her pants, underwear, and the rope used to kill her. He gathered these items and placed them in a large barrel, intending to burn them. However, he quickly reconsidered, realizing that a large fire would likely attract unwanted attention. Instead, Christopher dragged the barrel into a shed, closed the door, and started the fire inside. This revelation shocked Clark, who had previously suspected David of committing the crime and believed Christopher was withholding information. It was difficult for Clark to accept that a man he had known for nearly 20 years, a man with 3 young children of his own, was capable of such brutality. Although Christopher appears to be a good-natured man, his true nature is much more worrying. After finishing his story, Christopher willingly went to the police station with Clark. Once there, Christopher repeated his confession to the FBI agents and was subsequently arrested for murder. He also gave the authorities permission to search his trailer and car. As he concluded his confession, Christopher expressed regret over his actions and stated that he had cried uncontrollably the following day. The detectives then informed David about Christopher's confession. Given David's suspicious behavior and inconsistent statements, they suspected he might be covering for his friend. However, during interrogation, David revealed a shocking new testimony. David claimed that when he found Rowan missing from her room, he suspected Christopher might have taken her. He took his mother's car and drove to Christopher's trailer. He found Rowan lying on the bed. Christopher leaned towards her. Instead of rescuing Rowan, David joined in and also sexually assaulted her. He then helped Christopher kill her and dispose of her body. David reported that during that traumatic incident, his brain went into shock and he had no memory of the night for several days. The detectives, surprised by this new information, re-questioned Christopher to verify David's claim. However, Christopher maintained that David was not involved and that incident unfolded as he had initially described. The inconsistencies puzzled the detectives, but Christopher's account still matched incident that had occurred. Medical examination revealed that the victim was strangled with a thin rope, a detail that only the killer would be aware of. A search of the trailer led to the discovery of a barrel containing ashes and hair similar to Rowan's was found in Christopher's car. Although investigators were still uncertain about the truthfulness of each man's account, both David and Christopher made incriminating statements. As a result, David was also arrested, and the case were sent to court for further proceedings. During the trial, Christopher requested that his statements be excluded from the case, arguing that he was not aware they could be used against him and that the police had violated his rights. However, the judge rejected this request, as all of Christopher's conversations with investigators were voluntary. Christopher also attempted to present mitigating circumstances, citing his difficult childhood as a factor. He had been shuffled between biological and foster parents from a young age, which had a significant impact on him. Despite these efforts, Christopher was unable to avoid punishment. In 2012, 5 years after the murder, Christopher was sentenced to death. He appealed the sentence but was unsuccessful. In contrast, David's situation was more complex. Although he admitted to assaulting and killing Rowan, his account conflicted with Christopher's statements, creating a significant problem. If the prosecution had charged David with murder, it could have potentially led to Christopher's conviction being overturned, allowing David to avoid accountability as well. However, due to the lack of concrete evidence such as DNA, in fact, they were still uncertain about David's involvement. Although it was possible that David might have collaborated with Christopher in committing the crime, there was no supporting evidence for this theory. To minimize the risk of overturning Christopher's sentence, the prosecution made the difficult decision to reduce David's charges. As a result, David pleaded guilty to 2 lesser charges: child endangerment and obstruction of justice. David received an 11 years prison sentence with a minimum of 5 years to be served. This outcome sparked widespread outrage as many felt that if David was indeed involved in the murder, his punishment was disproportionately lenient. Unfortunately, this sentence is now final and it is unlikely that David will face retrial for this case. Christopher remains in prison awaiting execution, but it's uncertain whether the death penalty will be carried out due to the often lengthy time between sentencing and execution, which can span decades, meaning he might spend the rest of his life in prison instead. On November 6, 1999, when Jennifer Watkins failed to return home after her shift at the Memorial Hospital, her husband, Michael Watkins, called the Fountain Police Department to report her missing. On the same day, Irene Skinner, Jennifer Watkins' mother, who babysits her grandchildren, contacted the Colorado Springs Police Department after her daughter failed to come pick up the kids. Almost immediately, a report of a missing person was initiated by the Colorado Springs Police Department. During the initial investigation, detectives and investigating patrol officers carried out interviews with Jennifer Watkins' family members and co-workers numerous times. Officers were able to discover Jennifer Watkins' car with Michael Watkins' help in an employee parking area close to Printers Parkway and East Ikes Peak Avenue. The car was seized, but no items of evidence or hints connected to Jennifer Watkins' disappearance were found during the ensuing search. The investigators continued to search for Jennifer Watkins, interviewing people at the Memorial Hospital where she worked. While at the hospital on November 8, 1999, detectives received a word around 10 a.m. that a corpse had been discovered behind a stairwell in a section of the hospital that was still under construction. It appeared that 2 Dover elevator service workers entered the stairwell on the 8th level to examine and fix an elevator shaft that needed a repair. They perceived a very different and offensive smell as soon as they approached the stairwell area. When the elevator staff peered under the stairwell, they noticed what appeared to be the outline of a body bound with duct tape and covered in plastic. On request, the scene was immediately visited by investigators from the Colorado Springs Police Department Homicide Unit, Metro Crime Lab, and the El Paso County Coroner's Office. After the investigators removed the plastic, they found a deceased white female adult with brown hair. The victim was dressed in a purple blouse, black slacks, and a teal uniform smock. Her clothing was laid out in a way that suggested a sexual assault had taken place. Detectives questioned a number of workers and contractors at Memorial Hospital throughout the course of the investigation. No suspect was found despite looking into more potential suspect leads. The deceased adult female's autopsy was soon completed by the El Paso County Coroner's Office, and she turned out to be 23 years old Jennifer Watkins, who suddenly went missing a few days back. According to David Bowerman, the coroner for El Paso at the time, Jennifer had died of blunt force trauma to the head. Her death was determined to be a homicide. The question of who killed Jennifer Watkins bugged the police and her family for years. Jennifer Lee Watkins was born on the 24th of November, 1975 to William and Irene Skinner in Methuen, Massachusetts. She was the second of 4 children, and Joseph, her youngest brother, held a special place in her heart. Jennifer obtained her high school diploma from Hanover, Colorado High School. She enjoyed socializing with friends and caring for her pets. Jennifer loved playing volleyball and wished to help people. Her love for music made her join the school band as a clarinetist. Jennifer Watkins desired a career as a nurse. She and her husband Michael Watkins married on the 8th of April 1995, and roughly 3 years later, Michael was hired as a maintenance worker at the Memorial Hospital in Colorado Springs. Not long after, Jennifer was also hired there as a dietitian. The investigators worked tirelessly to bring justice to Jennifer's family. As part of the crime scene processing, a close inspection of the plastic used to wrap Jennifer Watkins' body turned up some hairs, fibers, and a yellow-whitish stain that was eventually identified as cement. At the autopsy, further biological evidence was also gathered. The Colorado Bureau of Investigation received a number of pieces of evidence for analysis. In addition to the victim's DNA profile, 2 other DNA profiles were created from the evidence items submitted for processing. The plastic wrap, the victim's pants, and semen samples taken at the autopsy were used to create these profiles. Although the semen found in Jennifer Watkins' pants and in the plastic wrap matched each other, they did not match the sample taken during the autopsy. A number of potential suspects had their biological samples taken, and all of them had been exonerated because their DNA did not match the 2 unidentified DNA samples. Although there were security cameras installed all over the hospital facility, the pictures were too blurry to be of much help. Police originally concentrated on those with access to the crime site, but there were no leads. They then shifted concentration on Michael Watkins, who worked night shift in the hospital's housekeeping division. Irene Skinner, Jennifer Watkins' mother, had her doubts about Michael. According to Irene, her daughter's life took a different turn after she moved in with her husband, Michael Watkins, whom she had attended grade school with. Irene Skinner reported that Michael Watkins struggled with drug use, and more often than not, Jennifer required multiple visits to the emergency department as a result of domestic abuse. Also, in addition to his volatile personality and tumultuous relationship with Jennifer, Michael Watkins had run-ins with the law in the past, which involved criminal mischief and a pellet gun incident. He was, however, interrogated multiple times. As the investigation progressed and he complied fully with all the proceedings, Michael admitted he had an affair with Jennifer since one of the DNA found on Jennifer Watkins' body came from him. He, however, denied killing her. After obtaining a warrant, they searched Michael Watkins' home and discovered a pair of pants that seemed to be covered in blood. An analysis of the object revealed that it was blood, but it was Michael's blood. The 2 DNA samples that were taken from the crime scene didn't provide any answers. Even if the one from Jennifer's body matched Michael's DNA, it didn't raise a red flag because Michael was married to Jennifer. The other DNA sample from the plastic was unknown. The police asked Michael Watkins to take a polygraph test, to which he consented and passed. Even though Michael was still a suspect, the detectives looked at other possibilities. They focused on a male hospital employee who mysteriously left town without warning or collecting his final salary immediately after the murder of Jennifer. During investigation, detectives soon discovered that the man was on probation for a murder in Louisiana, which he claimed was self-defense. When authorities located him, he rejected all accusations of involvement in Jennifer Watkins' murder and consented to provide a DNA sample. His DNA, however, didn't match the DNA discovered at the crime site where Jennifer was killed. Following a thorough investigation, no suspect was found and the case eventually became cold. Numerous investigators have been trying to identify a suspect in Jennifer Watkins for the past 21 years without success. Jennifer's case remained unresolved for a while. Over the years, technological advancements in familial DNA analysis occurred. Between 2017 and 2018, cold case investigators with the help of Parabon Nanolabs, a Virginia-based DNA technology business, used DNA phenotyping to determine the physical characteristics and ancestry of the unidentified DNA evidence at the crime scene. The suspect traits was predicted using the DNA evidence found in Jennifer Watkins' pants. Parabon made an individual prediction of the suspect's ancestry, eye color, hair color, skin tone, freckling, and face shape. A snapshot composite was created by combining these physical characteristics to show what the suspect would have looked like at age 25, and with an average body mass index of 22. Due to the fact that age and body mass index cannot be established from DNA, these default values were utilized. In an effort to generate leads, this photos was subsequently released to the public. The findings showed that the murderer had fair skin, blue or green eyes, blonde or brown hair, and was around 25 years old when the crime occurred. However, investigators were able to focus on a person who police had actually interrogated in 1999 after using genetic genealogy to narrow down the suspect. The killer was Ricky Sievert. According to a check of the original case report, Ricky Sievert, who was 29 at the time of the murder, was questioned by investigators on November 19, 1999, as a part of the initial homicide investigation. He was employed by Memorial Hospital and was a member of the maintenance team. He started working there in April 1998. According to Ricky Sievert's work schedule that he provided during his interview, on November 5, 1999, the day Jennifer Watkins was last seen, he would have been working a swing shift. Additionally, he denied ever having met Jennifer Watkins when asked. Finally, the culprit has been identified, but sadly, further investigation revealed that on November 2, 2001, 2 years after Jennifer Watkins' murder, Ricky Sievert was killed in a car accident on Highway 94, just east of Colorado Springs. The investigators obtained DNA samples from the suspect's living relatives. According to the Colorado Bureau of Investigation, the proportion of the population that may be excluded as a contributor to the DNA gathered in this case is 99.99994%. It means Ricky Sievert cannot be excluded. The 4th Judicial District Attorney's Office received the Jennifer Watkins case on October 1, 2020. For examination, the District Attorney's Office is certain that Ricky Sievert killed Jennifer Watkins. The investigation into the murder of Jennifer Watkins will be closed as exceptionally clear or death of offender because Ricky Sievert had already died in a car accident in 2001. After all these years, we are grateful to finally give Jennifer Watkins' family the answers they deserve. No matter the length of time, we will always work to serve this community. And I am proud of all the cold case detectives throughout the last 21 years who have never stopped working. For Miss Watkins, not for one moment did they ever lose sight of what was most important: finding the truth for the Watkins family. And thank you to our partners. We would not have been able to solve this case without your time, skill, and dedication, said Colorado Springs Police Department Chief Vince Niski.